if you can find the supraorbital margin, the supraorbital foramen, and we're going to talk about what foramen means in a second. It's basically a hole. The supraorbital foramen is located in the supraorbital margin. Now this one here is a little bit higher than you usually see it. I think in the plastic ones they almost have it like right here. But you see this hole right here. There is the supraorbital foramen. Now, a foramen is a hole in a bone that allows passage of a nerve, muscle, or artery, or vein. Okay. I'm going to keep repeating that for the next several days so that by the time, next Thursday, Wednesday night, you'll wake up in a cold sweat screaming, a foramen is a hole in the bone that allows passage of a nerve, muscle, or artery. You'll be an expert. All right, but look, there's a reason why those two were paired. Look how close they are to one another. So think about that when you're looking at the various stations and the things that are marked. Gee, I see this hole right here, and I know that's a foramen. And I know this is a supraorbital margin. So let me see, supraorbital margin. Oh yeah, he talked about things that were close to one another. He'd pair them. And there they are. All right, the last one we have here is frontal sinuses. All right, any question that deals with sinuses. Believe it or not, I don't have a skull where they broke the frontal bone open. They broke just about everything else. But I don't have one that has one where it is broken open. So, if I want to ask you a question about sinuses, you're going to see it's going to be on page 216. It's going to be this figure right here. It'll be printed out, and there'll be an arrow pointing to whatever, sinus that I'm looking for. If it's a frontal sinus, you see it's under the subcategory of frontal bone. Well, gee, it's got to be in the frontal bone somewhere. And there they are right there, frontal sinus. Sinuses are basically a hollowed out area that has trapped air. And it's there to help, just like air in, like a pool toy, keeps you floating above the water. Well, the air in these sinuses keeps the head, lightens the load, because you got basically this 12 to 13 pound bowling ball sitting up here, and by the end of the day you'd be kind of dragging. You'd be so tired holding it up. So the sinuses have this trapped air to help hold the head up. Now, of course, that's the good thing. The bad thing is when they get infected. Then, or if you have hay fever or some sort of allergy, then you pay for it. Okay? And the reason that you have such pain is whatever you're allergic to, or if you ended up getting a virus, or you ended up getting a bacteria. By the way, if you haven't taken, again I may have said this already, if you haven't taken microbiology, I can summarize the first 5 weeks in 10 seconds. Bacteria love an area that's warm, dark, moist, without light, without oxygen. That's the first 5 weeks of microbiology. So we've got a sinus that is warm, dark, moist, without light, and it's pretty much isolated. There is very little oxygen getting in there. Okay? Club Med for bacteria. Okay. They'll infect the area. The sinus is lined with blood vessels. The bacteria irritate the blood vessels. When blood vessels are irritated, they dilate. They get bigger. The size, the diameter gets bigger. So that more blood can get to the site and destroy the bacteria. Okay? When you have more blood getting to the site, when blood vessels get bigger, the tissue swells. That lining gets thicker. And now remember what's trapped in here. Air is trapped in here. So now this lining starts to swell and this whole area starts to get smaller. And it pushes on the air. And the air doesn't like to be pushed, so the air pushes back. And air pushing and putting pressure on that inflamed membrane, there is your pain associated with a sinus attack. Okay? Now you can take these nasal sprays, you can stick them up your nose and you can squeeze them, and what will happen is, if you take pharmacology, you'll learn that this is a drug. Its job is to contract blood vessels, to make them smaller. They're very big now in response to whatever infected the sinus. So now this drug is designed to make them smaller. Makes them smaller. Less blood's getting to the sinus. You don't have as much swelling. This membrane goes back to almost normal in size. It's not swollen. There goes your pain. Okay? So that's how they work. So any question on sinus, it's going to be tied to these figures, these two figures. So you already know one figure. You already know one figure that can be on your practice. All right. So what has happened then is we've done the first bone. We've done the frontal bone. All right. Gee, let's look at the next one. The next one, well, two parietal bones. Oh boy, look at that. There's nothing there. All you have are two boring parietal bones. One on one side, one on the other. Anatomists talk about these really as forming the roof of the skull. That's it. So the only thing you could possibly have here is a sticker, and it would say, identify this bone. Parietal bone. That's it. Nothing. There are no, subparts here. Okay, like we saw up here. All right, we get to the temporal bones, though. It's like, uh-oh. We got lots of things to deal with here. What I want you to do is we're going to kind of take this in different sorts of pieces. What I want you to do is, we'll come back and look at those in a little while. I want to start with, I want to start with number 4. Okay, the carotid foramen. Okay, you already know. A foramen is a hole in a bone that allows patches of a nerve, muscle, or artery. Okay? I want you to make a little note here, next to where it says carotid foramen. I want you to put in parentheses and write the words, look underneath. Okay? Look underneath. And what I want you to do is I want you to turn to page 205. Okay? Page 205. And you're going to see figure 7.6. And I want you to look at 7.6a. 7.6a. All right. We're going to try a way to map these out so that we can find our way around and get most of these without really having to try to memorize them. I'm going to have you, in your mind, draw almost like a slice of pie. Okay? But in any of these bones, what I want you to try and do is, I want you to try to find a reference mark. A mark. Something that is obvious. Something that you can see and you know right away. You know that, okay, I can find this because it's so obvious. If you're looking underneath, this large hole. We will see, we'll get to in the occipital bone, but I'm going to give it to you now. This is what is called the foramen magnum, the great foramen, or the greatest hole. This is the largest foramen in the body. What comes through here? The spinal cord. The spinal cord is coming down right at you. Okay? So the foramen magnum is the biggest hole and should be the easiest reference point for you to find. Okay? It's the biggest hole. All right. Let's go back to where we have number 4, and it says the carotid foramen. Okay. I want you to let's see if I can try and put 3 things on here at once. And then have page 205, that figure, as I said, figure 7.6. This will be a challenge. Okay, what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and have you draw out the triangle on this picture, okay? And then we're going to try and use our mind's eye here to do the same sort of thing with the skull on there. All right, remember the reference point, the big hole, foramen magnum, okay? The big hole, foramen magnum. Alright, using the foramen magnum and this picture, what I want you to do is to take a pencil or whatever you've got, and I want you to draw a diagonal line, okay? And here's where I want you to go. I want you to get the line so that it starts. I want you to get the line so that it starts dead center here in the foramen magnum, and you're drawing it a diagonal line, and it's going to end right here in this depression. And this depression is what is going to be called the mandibular fossa. There's going to be a depression. As a matter of fact, I said this was your cheekbone. If you have your skull right there, and you put your thumb right here, right where the tip of the yardstick is, you can almost feel this little depression, okay? This small little indentation on it, okay? So I want you to draw a diagonal line, all right, from here to there. There's going to be our first side of the slice of pie. Now, this line has connected the carotid foramen, the jugular foramen, and the mandibular fossa, as well as the occipital contact. Let me show you how that works. Remember, you drew the line. Okay, the line was going right in this direction. All right? Right underneath that line is this hole. Now, your book has this as canal. It's a foramen on there, and I don't know what the guy's thinking of on there, but or actually it was a woman that wrote this, what she was thinking. But anyway, or the guy that drew the picture. Carotid foramen. All right, foramen is a hole in a bone that allows passage of nerve, muscle, artery. Carotid. I think most of you know the biggest artery in your neck is the carotid artery. It's bringing blood to the brain. The carotid artery is going to go right through that opening. Look what is right next to it. As you drew that line, okay, you drew that line and went right over, depending on how you drew it, hopefully it looks something like this. It went right over the carotid foramen. Look what's number 5 on your list. Okay. Number 5 should be the jugular foramen. He says, yeah. Jugular foramen. Okay, there's a reason I put those two together, one after the other, because one is right next to the other. The jugular vein is the biggest vein in the neck that drains blood from the brain. Okay? So you have the carotid foramen and the jugular foramen. Alright? So now you say, okay, that's great. I drew the line in the book. I can't possibly draw the line on the skull. How am I going to do this? This is where you have to use your imagination. Okay? Here's our skull. Okay? Here's our reference point. Foramen magnum. Okay? Okay, here's our reference point. Here is where I told you to put your finger. There's a little depression right here. Okay, that's the mandibular fossa. Okay, that's actually where your jawbone's going to attach. So hopefully your mind's eye will have a line that looks like this. Okay, starting from the center of the foramen magnum, going out and ending with the mandibular fossa. Alright, we said that just underneath that line will be the carotid foramen. Right there is the carotid foramen. Here is your mandibular fossa. There is the line. The line went right over the carotid foramen, right there. Now, what will happen is, you may have a tag on here, and there'll be an arrow. Maybe I'll put a little tag right here with a number. And there'll be an arrow pointing, okay, to this. And it'll say, name this hole. All right, hole, that hole, gee, that's a foramen. Foramen is a hole in bone that allows nerve, passes the nerve, muscle, or artery. Okay? So, it's okay for you to take out a pen and say, okay, wait, I can do that line thing. Let me just see if I can imagine that line. Oh yeah, there's that line. That carotid foramen was right underneath my line. To even help you more, the carotid foramen is about halfway on your line between the mandibular fossa, and your, this right here, this large, smooth, rounded projection. This is the occipital condyle. Remember, your line's going this way. It started foramen magnum, went through the occipital condyle, and went right over the carotid foramen. And there is the mandibular fossa. So, again, if I could put the pen right here, see it's right almost in between the middle of the occipital condyle and that mandibular fossa, right there. Now, you're going to say, all right, I can buy that, but what's the deal with the jugular? With the jugular, all you do is, let me keep the pen pointing to the carotid foramen. There's the carotid foramen. All you do is you rotate the skull just a little bit. Right underneath, as you rotate the skull, all of a sudden this foramen becomes more and more and more and more visible. You really can't see much here, where, yeah, you see a little bit of an opening. But if you just rotate it a little bit, all of a sudden you see this big opening right here. There's the jugular foramen. Carotid. Carotid, jugular. You look on your book. You're going to have carotid, jugular. Occipital condyle. There's my line starting from my reference point of the foramen magnum. I draw it out to the mandibular fossa. What is it going to go over? It's going to go over the carotid foramen. And right next to it is going to be the jugular foramen. You have those two together. Okay? All right, we've already, and so what has happened is drawing that line, you have, this is my light, it's really dark here. Drawing that line, what you have done is you've connected 4, 5, and 6. They're just on that line. 4, 5, and 6. Just by drawing a line and remembering where that line is and what it covers. Instead of you staring at the bottom of this skull for hours, you know, we have to be efficient and we have to be able to pick this stuff off as easy as possible. All right, so we've gotten 4, 5, and 6. Okay, now we have number 7, number 8, and number 9. In case you haven't figured out, these are Roman numerals here. I don't know what it is. I did this in Microsoft Word, and I had to do the auto format, and all of a sudden I started doing Roman numerals. All right, so there's the first 3. Number 7 here, mastoid portion. Okay, well, I already had mentioned, you know, you put your hand behind your ear here and you feel this bump. Okay, that bump is located in the mastoid portion. All right, you're going to say, how can I find that? Here we go again. Go back to your picture here. And what I want you to do is, I want you to draw a line. Remember we had this diagonal line going out here to the mandibular fossa. Okay? I want you to draw a line straight down. Okay? I want you to draw a line straight down. All right? Till you hit these bumps here. You probably curve it a little bit. Until you hit these ridges. You see them, so you hit these ridges. So maybe from here to there. Okay. This is going to be the second leg of our triangle. Second leg of our triangle. Okay. All right. So we have to find the mastoid portion. Well, the mastoid portion, remember I said was a bump on there. And they got all this really basically over on this side, but you'll also have it over here. This area where you feel this bump, you look at the bottom of your skull, and you're looking for a rounded bump. Okay? On mine, because I keep this one up here because it's been so beat up, okay, this no longer has a rounded portion, but believe it or not, that's what it's supposed to be right here, and it's been chipped away on there. But you have this bump that would be right about here. okay, between my thumb and forefinger. That is the mastoid process. That is number 9. Okay? But if you think of the bump as a mountain, so the mountain is the mastoid process, the immediate area at its base, the immediate area at the bottom of the mountain that circles around the mountain, mastoid portion. Portion designates an area. Process designates a bump. Okay? So I had you draw that line from the mandibular fossa down from here to there. Okay? Well, it goes right past the mastoid process. And it goes right over that surrounding area at the base of the mountain of the mastoid process. It goes right over that area that is the mastoid portion. Portion is an area, process is the bump. So by drawing a line downward, you've connected now the mastoid process with the mastoid portion. Okay? So you've connected 9 and, where am I? I'm sorry, 7 and 9. We've got process twice here on your list. We connected 7, the portion, with the bump. Remember portion? Well, just think of portion, size. You know, meal portions. Are they large, small? What? Well, they're describing an area. So portion describes the area, process is the bump. Okay, I want you to put an X through mastoid air cells. I have nothing to show for mastoid air cells, so we're going to get rid of that one. And also get rid of this one here because it's repeated twice. You have mastoid process as 9, and then you have mastoid process as 11. So let's just get rid of number 11 on here. So far by drawing 2 lines, we have been able to orient ourselves to find the carotid foramen, jugular foramen, mandibular fossa, the mastoid portion, and the mastoid process. Okay, we've got number 8, that is something called the external auditory or acoustic meatus. The word meatus, the best definition I can give you for meatus is a tunnel. Okay? Is a tunnel. And here is how you can find it. Take your index finger and stick it in your ear. You have your finger in the external auditory meatus. If you can find your index finger and stick it in your ear, that is the external auditory meatus. Alright, how will I find that? Well, we have to, remember we had this line going down. Okay? Diagonal, going down. Alright? If I just keep my thumb right here in that mandibular fossa, and let me just flip it over onto the side. You see my thumb? There is where you stick your index finger. There's the external auditory meatus. The external auditory meatus. Okay? The external auditory meatus. Alright. Now, you've got, while we're talking about auditory meatus, come down to number, you duplicated the numbers here. this would be 11, 12, 13. Come down to where it says internal auditory meatus. Okay, internal auditory meatus. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take your pen, pencil, whatever. Okay. And I want you to draw an arrow. And I want you to connect. Draw an arrow, and I want you to connect the internal auditory meatus with number 3. That's called the petrious portion. Okay? Number 3 is called the petrious portion. And then what I want you to do in parentheses, I want you to write, look inside. Now we have to look and flip the skull over and look at the floor of the skull. Okay, look at the floor of the skull. Now, I had you draw these two to connect them together. Number 3, the petrious portion. If you are looking on the floor of the skull, you see almost like this shelf right here. Okay? That comes up from the side and the floor of the skull. It's almost like a shelf. Okay? There's a lip right here, and then it goes kind of down underneath. This is what is called the petrious portion. Okay, that's why I had you put in parentheses, look inside. It almost looks like a shelf that you put something on. Now, there's a reason I had you connect the petrious portion with the internal auditory meatus. I'm going to keep my finger on the petrious portion. I'm going to rotate this just a little bit. See if I can catch the light. Right there is the internal auditory meatus. It's in the petrious portion. That's why I had you connect the two. If you can find the shelf, just look for, rotate the skull and just look for the hole. Okay, that's the other end of the tunnel. If I have the pen in the internal auditory meatus, and then I take another one, a pencil, put it in the external auditory meatus, look what happens. The two of them are in a straight line. That's how the nerve comes from the middle of the ear into the brain. Okay? They're just in a straight line between each other. The external, of course, a lot of people like to put pencils in their ears. The external auditory meatus, the internal auditory meatus. It's on the shelf of the petrious portion. Okay, so those two we had to go kind of looking, around for them. So we've looked at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We got rid of 10. We got rid of 11. We looked at the internal auditory meatus. We only got a couple left. We've got something that is badly misspelled. It actually should be stylomastoid foramen. Okay, we got the word mastoid in there. Gee, look where it is. It lies right underneath all this mastoid stuff. So there's a reason I put it there. To try to get you to think about, okay, yeah, it's got the word mastoid in it, and he's got it right underneath all this other mastoid stuff. So, and it's got to be a hole. Okay? It's got to be a hole, because it's a foramen. What I want you to do again is I want you to take your pen or pencil or whatever you got and draw an arrow. Draw an arrow and connect the stylomastoid foramen with the styloid process. And there's a reason why I'm going to have you do that. Because they're going to be right next to each other. Draw an arrow, connect the stylomastoid foramen with the styloid process. Okay, if you look on your book, they have